What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Friday, February 19th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we got a 9-game slate tonight. So let's take a look at the point guard position. I like Ricky Rubio from the Minnesota Timberwolves playing the Toronto Raptors, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing point guards. Ricky Rubio has averaged 22.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 25 minutes per game with a 16% usage rate. But take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 45, 28, and 25 fantasy points, playing 35, 29, and 29 minutes. He's projected at 28.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.4 times value. He's 5,300 FanDuel salary and 900 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. This is more of a FanDuel play for me. Ricky Rubio, he scored 25, 36, 38, 32, and 27 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Toronto Raptors. So that's really good player versus team history. Now he's playing a ton of minutes. He's been productive the past couple of games. So I like Ricky Rubio here versus the Toronto Raptors. Another point guard that I like is Ja Morant from the Memphis Grizzlies playing the Detroit Pistons, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and although they've been pretty good against opposing point guards, Ja Morant has averaged 35 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 29% usage rate. He scored 46, 42, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 30, and 31 minutes. He's projected at 36.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 7,100 FanDuel salary and 300 more on DraftKings. So I like Ja Morant here versus the Detroit Pistons. Okay, another point guard that I like is Chris Paul from the Phoenix Suns playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Chris Paul has averaged 37.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He scored 47, 37, and 45 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 35, 28, and 33 minutes. He's projected at 37.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He's 7,800 FanDuel salary and 100 less on DraftKings. So Vegas thinks there's going to be 231 points scored in this game. It's a fantastic matchup. So I like Chris Paul here versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I'm going to give you a value play here. I like Seth Curry from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Chicago Bulls, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing shooting guards. Seth Curry has averaged 21.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 36, 14, and 14 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 36, 37, and 34 minutes. He's projected at 23.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.9 times value. He's only 4,000 FanDuel salary, but he is 800 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. So he's been playing a ton of minutes the last 3 games, 34 to 37 minutes, and he put up that 36 last game. So I think that makes him an excellent value play on FanDuel, mediocre value play on DraftKings, but I like Seth Curry here versus the Chicago Bulls. Okay, here's a nice DraftKings play for you at the shooting guard position. I like Andrew Wiggins from the Golden State Warriors playing the Orlando Magic, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Andrew Wiggins has averaged 30.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He scored 27, 27, and 35 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 38, 29, and 33 minutes. He's projected at 31.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's $6,500 FanDuel salary, but he's $500 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. And he scored 39, 51, 21, 23, and 34 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Orlando Magic. 3 of those 5 games, he got you 5 times value or more. So I like Andrew Wiggins here versus the Orlando Magic. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like Chris Middleton from the Milwaukee Bucks playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Chris Middleton has averaged 36.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. Now, he hasn't been playing that well lately. He's only scored 27, 20, and 32 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 37, 37, and 35 minutes. He's projected at 38.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's $7,300 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. So Vegas thinks there's going to be 233 points scored in this game. So we got a high scoring game. And I'm looking for Chris Middleton to have a bounce back game here in a great matchup. So I like Chris Middleton here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, the other small forward that I like, especially on DraftKings, is Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Pascal Siakam has averaged 40.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. He scored 50, 49, and 43 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 37, 38, and 36 minutes. He's projected at 40.4 fantasy points here tonight. Now on FanDuel, that's only 4.6 times value because he's $8,700 FanDuel salary, but he's $1,000 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. So he scored 43, 55, and 31 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Timberwolves. And he's getting a little extra usage rate here without Kyle Lowry. So this is probably just a DraftKings play only for me. But I like Pascal Siakam here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. The stud of the night, I like Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Milwaukee Bucks playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Giannis Antetokounmpo has averaged 54.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 33% usage rate. He scored 50, 74, and 72 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 37, 37, and 35 minutes. He's projected at 57.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 11,300 FanDuel salary, but he's 500 less on DraftKings. So I like that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 233 points scored in this game, and Giannis has scored 72, 54, 58, and 54 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Thunder. Now, this is a back-to-back, so that's a little bit concerning, but he should be able to hit value here, especially on DraftKings. So I like Giannis Antetokounmpo here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, another power forward that I like is John Collins from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall, and they give up the 13th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. John Collins has averaged 32.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. He scored 31, 30, and 34 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 27, 30, and 36 minutes. He's projected at 32.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He's 6,800 FanDuel salary and the same price on DraftKings. Now, he's got good player versus team history. That's why I like this pick. He scored 31, 48, 47, 26, and 45 fantasy points in the last 5 games versus the Celtics. So 3 of those 5 games he crushed value. 1 of those games he hit value. Then he had 1 dud in there. So I like John Collins here versus the Boston Celtics. And one more power forward for you. This is a nice mid-range play on both sites. I like Jay Crowder from the Phoenix Suns playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Jay Crowder has averaged 22.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 28 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 34, 31, and 16 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 24, and 32 minutes. He's projected at 22.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.7 times value. He's 4,800 FanDuel salary and the same price on DraftKings. So he only really needs about 24 fantasy points to hit value here. And we know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 231 points scored in this game. It's a good matchup. So I like Jay Crowder here versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Okay, moving on to the center position. I like Joel Embiid from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Chicago Bulls, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing centers. Joel Embiid has averaged 51.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 34% usage rate. He scored 61 and 49 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 36 and 36 minutes. He's projected at 54.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.2 times value. He's 10,300 FanDuel salary and 400 more on DraftKings. So he scored 67 and 47 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Bulls. So I like Joel Embiid here versus the Chicago Bulls. Okay, another center that I like is Jonas Valanciunas from the Memphis Grizzlies playing the Detroit Pistons, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing centers. Jonas Valanciunas has averaged 34.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 27 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He scored 40, 18, and 43 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 28, and 26 minutes. He's projected at 35.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.6 times value. He's 7,700 FanDuel salary, but he's 600 less on DraftKings. So this is a DraftKings play only for me. I think he hits value no problem at only 7,100 DraftKings salary. Vegas thinks there's going to be 222 points scored in this game, and he did score 61 fantasy points in his last game versus the Pistons. So I like Jonas Valanciunas here versus the Detroit Pistons. Okay, another nice value play on DraftKings is Willy Hernangomez from the New Orleans Pelicans playing the Phoenix Suns, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing centers. Willy Hernangomez, he scored 30 and 27 fantasy points in his last 2 games, playing 29 and 19 minutes. He's projected at 20.2 fantasy points here tonight. Now on FanDuel, that's 4.6 times value because he's 4,400 FanDuel salary, but he's 500 less on DraftKings. So we know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 231 points scored in this game. So this gives you some nice, cheap exposure to this high-scoring game. So I like this DraftKings play. So I like Willy Hernangomez here versus the Phoenix Suns.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.